Chord symbols. A chord symbol represents a harmonic framework, a sound of at least more than one note, in time played close enough to one another to be related enough to be called a harmony. Either somebody wrote some piece of music and used chord symbols to outline the harmonies for you, or you want to write some music and use chord symbols to outline the harmonies you hear in your head for somebody else. In both situations, it's important to understand what the symbols represent, what limitations, and at the same time the freedom they contain for the interpreter. Chord symbols most of the time don't tell you exactly when all the notes are played, or what register the notes are played, in what order, what voicing, most of the time not even which notes, what volume, what timbre. So, what does it tell you actually? Or what can you determine using chord symbols in your writings? Well, there are a few things, of course, that you can decide. The character of the chord, of the harmony, like is it major, is it minor, dominant, augmented, suspended. You tell what the lowest note of the chord is, and so on. So there's still something to get here. In handwriting or printed charts all over the world, you will find so many different symbols for the same chords that it would be impossible to go over all possibilities here. Even if you only look at the printed music of well-known composers or arrangers, you will find even contradictions all over the place. Nevertheless, I would like to go over a format that in many situations will help you as well to understand what is written as to be clear and understood in your writing of chord symbols. Let's first have a look at the basic structure before going into more detailed looks at all elements. For instance, in some piece of music you could find this chord symbol: C minor, minor 7th, minus 5, 9. C half diminished with a 9. Well, if you look at this, you could say that the structure you can find like this. So first on the left side you see the root, then next to there on the bottom there's something about the third, it's a minor third. On top you see something about the 7th, it's a minor 7th. And in the middle there's something written about the 5th, it's the diminished 5. And then top right you will find some additional info. Outside the octave there's a 9 added to the chord. We could even have an A flat in the bass. Bringing it back to the basics, we look at the blocks, the building blocks of the chord symbol. And here you see, first of all, there's something about the root. The root is written clear in a capital in the biggest size. Here's something about the third. Let's have a look what we can write about the third. If the third is major, we don't need to write anything. This is just a major third. If the third is minor, we will write min. If we don't want a third at all, we write omit 3. If the third is not there, but it will be there, it's, as we call it, suspended, we say sus, as an abbreviation for suspended. And here are two possibilities. It could be sus 4, or it can also be sus 2. So this is what we can say about the third. So let's go back to the first screen. On the top we can see the 7th. So what can we say about the 7th? Let's have a look. Well, you don't always want a 7th in the chord. So if you don't want a 7th, you write nothing. That's clear, no 7th. If it's a major 7th, I like to write the major triangle. It's the triangle for major 7th. So it tells you only something about the 7th. If you want a minor 7th, I like to write the 7th. So sometimes you have a diminished 7th chord, and that means that the 7th is double flat. In the case of C, for instance, C diminished, the double flat B sounds like an A. So you could write either 6, so it's not clear if it's a double diminished B or a natural, but the sound is the same. If the whole chord is diminished, I like to use the symbol, just a small circle. This small circle tells you that it's a diminished 7th chord. That means there's a minor third, a diminished 5 and a diminished 7. So in the key of C that would be C, E flat, G flat, B double flat, sounding as an A. So let us go back to the basic structure again. Here we have everything is there, and let's have a look at the 5th. So what can the 5th be? The 5th can be natural, then you don't need to say anything. 5th is natural, nothing has to be written. If the 5th is diminished, I like to write -5. So here there are some other options. I mean, if you look in charts, a lot of people write, instead of writing -5, the minus sign is sometimes also used for minor. So this is not always that clear. But for me this is the most clear if I'm doing always the same. So for me this is a diminished 5th. If the 5th is augmented, I will write +5. Sometimes I even leave out the 5 because it's clear if you write it on the right spot. The plus sign makes clear that the 5th is augmented. If you don't want a 5 at all, I would write omit 5. Some people also for diminished 5 write flat 5, and for augmented 5th they write sharp 5. Well, for me that's not always that clear. For instance, if the chord would be, C half diminished, for instance, the 5th is diminished, the G is indeed a G flat. If the chord would be B half diminished, the 5th isn't flat, because a normal B, a 5th on B would be F sharp. So that means that the F sharp, there's a natural sign because of the F. And that's not a flat sign. So that makes the flat 5 not that clear always. Same with the sharp 5. Again with C augmented 5th, it's a G sharp. So it's a G sharp. There the sharp sign is on its place. But if the chord would be different, if it would have been E flat with augmented 5th, in that case the B flat is raised a half step, it becomes a B natural, so there's no sharp here, it's a natural sign again. So for that reason I also don't like to use the sharp 5 sign here. So let's bring it back again to the main screen to have a look at what structure we had. And there's top right, miscellaneous. This is actually everything else outside the octave, or some things that are within the octave but not in the basic structure of the chord, looking at the 3rd, 5th and 7th note. That could be added to, there can be an 11th chord, a 9, flat 10, flat 9, sharp 11, flat 13, 13. All this extra information I would like to write in brackets. So if you have a chord with a added sharp 11, I like to write in brackets plus 11. Well, the plus 11 for the same reason as with the plus 5 and the minus 5. The 11 isn't always a sharp if you want to be it a plus 11. You can also have the situation that there's a chord without a 7 but something outside the octave. Then I would leave the spot for the 7 open and I could write, for instance, add 9. That's clear enough. Also sometimes there can be it sounds like a 9 but it's played low in the chord, like below the 3rd, and then the same note an octave lower would be add 2. Okay, let's have a look at the last spot to discuss the bass note. Let's bring it back to the screen with, here we are. So bottom right it says bass. This is where we can write the alternative bass note. So that could be a B flat. So what we have here is whatever the chord is, we write here the bass note. Sometimes it's an inversion. It's just one of the chordal notes that we put in the bass, the 3rd, the 5th, the 7th. It can also be a compound chord or a bitonal sometimes even. So if you have, for instance, a D minor 9 with a G in the bass, or we have a dominant with an F in the bass, that would be a easier way to read it. Sometimes people prefer to write F major plus 5 added 9. It's the same sound, but well, to play it is sometimes easier to read A dominant with an F in the bass. There are a few symbols that I would like to talk about. Already earlier I said for the diminished chord, we have, for instance, D diminished. This would be a minor 3rd F, and the diminished 5th, it's the A flat, and the diminished 7, which is C flat. So that's D diminished. Another chord that you might find is, for instance, D half diminished. This is minor 7 and a diminished 5th. So it's called half diminished. So in this case it would be D, F, A flat, C. There's another chord that's an abbreviation. It's a short way of writing. If you have a dominant chord This is D dominant with everything added that you can find in the octatonic scale. Then I would write D7 oct. And in that case there is a flat 9, sharp 9 or flat 10, sharp 11 and a 13. So another one that's also really nice is the altered chord. In that case, all the notes from the altered scale are in the chord. So that means there's a flat 9, sharp 9 or flat 10, sharp 11 and a flat 13. And normally actually the fifth is not played. So you could also say it's a sharp 5 or plus 5. Well, I hope this all helps a bit in knowing where to look in the music to find what you need to know. Root on the left, the biggest letter. Then next to it on the bottom, something about the third. On top, something about the seventh. In between, something about the fifth. And like I said before, only if needed. If there's nothing written, there is no seventh, or the fifth is natural and the third is major. Then bottom right, you can find an alternative bass note if needed, and top right, you'll find some miscellaneous other information that you might need to play the complete chord as it's meant. And at the same time, use also the same information to write clear for everybody reading your music to make it sound the way you have in your head. Have fun.
Made with Doodlecast Pro.